Okay, so moving on to the next series of low cost growing. Now you want to start your seeds. We've already covered how to make potting mix, where to buy potting mix, how to make it, a wormery, a cheap way to grow your plants in, so tin cans. Now another thing that you can do is if you're trying to start off your plants, you can start it off in ice trays. Now this little ice tray cost me, I think it was about £1.25. It was very, very cheap, and I just punctured little holes in it. And the reason I like this is because I can grow a whole load of plants in a small space, and once I've seen they've germinated, I can take them out and transfer them into this pot. But you don't have to do that. You could just plant the seeds directly into this if that's what you want to do. Whichever way you decide to do this, the technique is going to be pretty much the same. Just fill it up with the potting mix or the compost and just pat it down very lightly. You don't want it to be right on the edge because you're going to be putting the seeds on there, and then you're going to be covering it with a light layer of compost or potting mix. And the same thing for this. So I'm just going to take my finger and just lightly press down the middle. I don't want to squash it right down. We're just lightly pressing. We're not trying to turn this into little bricks. And then what I like to do is to spray it with water. Now this is also a very, very cheap thing to make. All you need to do is get one of those cheap 20p vinegar bottles. Once you've finished, you reuse the bottom. And then this is just an old spray bottle top for house cleaning. You do have to rinse this multiple times very, very thoroughly until you can't smell any of the product. But once that's done, you can use it just to spray water. And I've done this with many, many plants, so I know that there is no more bleach left in this. It's absolutely fine. I don't want this to be wet, I just want this to be damp, and I'm going to be doing the same thing to this over here. And the reason you want it damp and not wet is because if it's too wet, what can happen is that the seeds will just rot. But if it's damp, that's going to activate the germination process and things are going to start growing. Now, presumably you're not trying to grow 25 cells of the same plant. You're going to be growing chives, thyme, lettuce, all that kind of stuff. You're going to be growing maybe 2 or 3 cells of the same thing. Don't try and memorize it. You're not going to memorize it. It's not going to be possible. You're going to mess up. And at this stage, if you haven't gardened before, you're not going to be able to recognize what the plant is from when they first get those tiny little leaves. So what you're going to do is you're going to take an old milk bottle and you're going to cut this up to make little labels. So you could also cut this up to get some labels, but the easiest part to cut up into labels is the bottom, and you can see I've just cut little strips. I'm using these garden snips. I use these as kitchen scissors because they're a lot easier on my hand, and this hand I broke my thumb a few years ago, and it's a bit sensitive if I have to constantly be doing this manual movement. So having this little spring makes it a lot easier, and I'm going to cut this into labels and label up where I want the seeds. And this is what they look like when they're done.